Georgia is having an impact on the United States' energy concerns, presidential politics, and, of course, military strategy. With details, we turn now to Major General Tom Wilkerson. He's a retired U.S. Marine Corps general and currently the CEO of the United States Naval Institute, and Michael Lynch, who is the president of Seer Global Petroleum Services. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Major, let me start with you. There has been a lot made of the conversations that are going on right now between the United States, of course, Europe and the West, in terms of trying to find some resolution to this crisis, frankly. And it appears as though Russia is not truly listening, because what we hear on the ground from both Fox News and our Wall Street Journal, which is the sisters of this network, suggests that the fighting hasn't slowed at all. Tell us, what do you make of that?
Alexis, I think the fighting will very clearly stop when Russia attains the objectives that made her introduce armored forces into Georgia to begin with. And it also seems clear that the only responses from NATO and from the United States are talk and diplomacy, and that won't work in the near term unless the Russians are satisfied.
Major, explain this one to me. Does this come down to the bottom line is this is all about NATO? And this is an opportunity for NATO to step up. I mean, frankly, the Russians knew that Georgia's admission into NATO was on hold, or they had put it on hold. And what does this mean for the future of those countries who are also on hold and waiting to become a member of NATO?
Alexis, you can bet that not only those that are on hold, which includes the Ukraine, but also those that are recently been accepted, and that's most of the republics that were once part of the Soviet Empire as it moved east towards, or west towards Europe. What we're going to see is all of these folks are going to take temperatures about what's going on, and they're going to look to NATO and to the United States, to their actions, not their words, and they're going to assess whether there's a future here or not. Clearly, Russia has reasserted her dominance in the region. And also clearly, NATO and the United States have indicated that they're not able to respond. There's such a thing called the NATO Response Force. It has about 25,000 people in it. There was a very clear possibility they could have sent that into the region as a military response to what the Russians were doing, just to put it in Georgia, not necessarily to engage in combat operations. But it hasn't gone, and there's been no response.
Michael, let's talk about the dollars and cents and the implications here for oil. We hear this morning that BP has reopened that BTC pipeline, which is an important pipeline, I understand, predominantly for Europeans. But talk to me about the implications not only for the pipelines in Georgia, but for the entire region now, which appears as though this conflict is not going to end in the short term.
Well, it looks as if, people are going to be a lot more worried. You've got a lot of oil coming out of the Caspian, especially Kazakhstan, that has to transit this region somehow. And so the question is going to be, where are you going to put your pipelines? Are you going to say, let's put them in Russia because, they'll be safe from Russian attack? Or are you going to say the Russian pipelines are going to be a lot more politically diverted to the point where maybe you want to stay away from Russia? So longer term, I think it raises the temperature and the risk factor.
And Michael, do we have any leverage with the Russians? Because right now, I mean, based on what the Major General is talking about, and at least what we've seen in the actions right now of either Vladimir Putin or Medvedev, they're not suggesting that they are willing to, I guess, make amends with the United States. So do we have any leverage?
Not really. I mean, Russia is too big to embargo, to use a phrase from the subprime crisis. They export about 6 million barrels of oil a day, which is, nobody comes near that except the Saudis. And, we can't stop buying their oil and gas. And other than that, we can't really risk, I think, military action, aside from the fact that it's not that easy to fight a war at that distance.
Would you agree, Major, that we cannot, or we cannot or perhaps should not initiate military action, or should we?
Alexis, that's something that NATO could do if they wish to, and it appears that they're inept and not able to do that, and the signal should be loud and clear. And on the United States side, one of the things that your viewers will carry away, Georgia is a friend, if not an outright ally, part of the coalition of the willing. I think they've sent troops to Afghanistan alongside American forces. The idea that we can't do anything to support them is a very clear indication that we're not what we should be.
And Major, what does this do to the presidential race here in the United States? I mean, I would imagine that some of the jawboning that is going on is because President Bush is about to end his presidency, and it's an election year. What does it do?
Well, I can tell you this. If you're an American citizen who intends to vote, you have two things to consider. First, what you were talking about earlier, and that is that the United States is in the middle of a fairly strong economic challenge, and that is going to continue. But secondly, now, the new president is going to be confronted with an equally challenging international incident that will not go away. So on day one of his presidency from either party, you're going to need a strong leader who has the capability to influence us in the economic terms internationally and inside the country, and internationally in terms of asserting the United States' ability to influence actions far beyond our shores. That's a challenging duo.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right. Well, Major General Wilkerson and, of course, Michael Lynch, I want to thank you both so much for joining me this morning to bring us up to date on the story.